Okay, my name is Jenna Kulwicki, and I am interviewing Jim Gerloff on November 21st, 2016 at 810 Glenwood, Hastings, Nebraska. And Jim Gerloff is actually my grandpa, and we are at my mom's house and his daughter's house. So, Jim, we're going to talk about the Vietnam War today, and the way that I guess that I took it as you were stationed in Korea during the Vietnam War. Is that correct?
Right.
Right. Okay. And so, where were you born?
Adams County, Nebraska.
Okay. And then what day, year?
July 2nd, 1944.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your childhood.
For the most part, I had 4 older sisters. I was the only boy, and being the youngest, I was. It's not that I didn't have guidance. I just kind of took care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what were your parents like?
My parents?
Yeah.
My parents were absolutely wonderful. I had good parents.
Good. And so what were you doing prior to the beginning of the war? So before you had had any knowledge of the Vietnam War, what was kind of your life like?
Well, my first knowledge of what was going on at the war or in the world was from school, magazines, media, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was, at the beginning of all of that, I was only 16, 17 years old.
Yeah. And how old were you when the war actually started?
That's kind of debatable, what
Yeah.
I call war and what some of the politicians at that time more or less thought the war was. I had some friends that went to Vietnam that actually got killed, but even after that point in time, there was politicians that declared the fact that we weren't at war.
Right.
And in fact, we were at war.
Uh-huh. So, and a lot of the kind of thought that went along with the Vietnam War is that the public and a lot of people didn't actually know what was kind of going on. Would you say that that was true? That a lot of stuff was hidden from us?
I think a lot of it was because a lot of the general public at that point didn't know what was going on unless, somehow you were involved. And like I said, I was involved because I had a couple friends that went to Vietnam that actually got killed before most of the people even figured out what was going on.
Yeah, that must have been tough. So when did you first learn about the Vietnam War? Was that when your friends were stationed out there, or when were you kind of getting a sense of what was going on?
Well, again, it was, I knew about what the conflict was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a conflict. They called it a conflict. It was. It was actually the beginning of the war, because the Viet Cong and stuff, a good friend of mine that I actually worked with, just a matter of a year before I was drafted, went to Vietnam, and during that year, he lost his life. And at that point in time, President Ford declared on television that we were not in a full-scale war with the Viet Cong. Well, I disagree with that, because I had a friend that took a bullet that killed him from a Viet Cong. So, my perception of that is that's war, not a conflict.
Yeah, of course. And do you think that that kind of changed your perspective on war, the fact of how you kind of learned about that?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, and what were some of your biggest concerns involving the Vietnam War? You talked about the death of your friend and stuff, but was there any other concerns involving coming into that war? Were you scared about anything or thought something wasn't right coming into it?
Well, at that point in time, I guess the concern was loss of life because there was, you know, we were fighting a war that we could have won, in my perspective, because of the military power that we had, but we were fighting under the guidelines of a bunch of politicians that was more worried about their jobs than they were about the loss of life. That's, in my eyes, that's the way it was.
Yes, yes. And then because there were numerous presidents over that time period of the Vietnam War, were there any presidents that maybe stuck out to you in either a positive way or a negative way?
President Ford, in a negative way.
Yeah.
Again, because of the fact, before he made the statement that we were not at war, I lost two good friends in Vietnam because of military conflict.
Yeah.
That, in my eyes, if I'm going to define war from conflict, is live power, or fire rather. And it's just, you know, how can you say we're not at war when you have people getting killed?
Yeah, correct. And then were there any of those presidents that you had maybe a positive lookout on, or were you just kind of iffy about the whole thing?
Well, see, Eisenhower, you know, was in power, and John F. Kennedy came into power. Of course, President Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson took over. You know, it's just, you know, all them politicians, if they would have stayed out of the war and said to the military people, you know, we're in a conflict, go fight it to win. But they didn't do that. You know, they would, numerous times during the war, there would be a certain, you know, they'd go out, the military would take a certain area, but they wouldn't hold the ground. They would take it, back off, and the next day there was as many Viet Cong there then as there was the day before. But prior to all of that, the day before when they took the land, they probably lost several American soldiers. Well, if that's the key, you're going to do that. And once you take it, hold it. Don't back off from it, because they're just going to take over again. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And that's again, in my eyes, that's a dumb way to, you know, if you're going to fight a war, fight it to win it. But again, in my eyes, the politicians back here, because of the general public that was against the war, you know, they were burning draft cards and all that kind of stuff, and the public was demonstrating against the war. The politicians were scared to death they're going to lose their jobs. So they went along with the general public instead of trying to fight the war to win it. They didn't care about these American soldiers getting killed, in my eyes. They were more worried about their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so overall, what do you think the United States' reason was for being involved in this war?
No, I don't think we did. I don't. You know, that whole area, you take Vietnam, Laos, all them countries, there was a conflict going on. You know, the communists against the rest, the democratic way. Well, you had a fragile, but yet a democratic government in South Vietnam. North Vietnam was communist. They were backed by the communist Chinese. You know, we were fighting a war that we could have won if we'd used the power that we had through the military. You know, But again, the politicians wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give the military, the go-ahead and try to win the war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now we can maybe start talking about the time around when you were being deployed. So what was maybe going on in your mind when you found out that you were going to be drafted? What was kind of going on in your life at that time?
At the time I was drafted?
Yeah.
Well, I was actually, I was working, and I was preparing to get married.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, that's kind of what I was doing, but I got drafted.
Yeah.
I could have, if the people at the draft board said, and I said, I'm supposed to get married. I was drafted when I was 20 years old. I was supposed to get married in July. Well, the end of May, I got a draft notice. So I went to the draft board and said, I'm supposed to get married in July. And they said, well, go ahead and get married. If you do, we're not taking married people. Well, I had a decision to make at that point, and I guess I felt obligated to serve my country.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the service, and during that time, while I was in the service, I got married. But so I did both.
So from the time that you were drafted, then how long was it until you were married?
June, July, August, September, 4 months.
4 months. So you had got married, and then they said that they weren't taking married men, but you volunteered to go anyways. Is that the right understanding? Okay, correct. And then at that time of the draft, were there lots of your friends being drafted? Lots of men here being drafted?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, 2 of them that I knew real well, worked with one of them. Mm-hmm. Both lost their lives over there.
Okay. And then did you know any men going over to Korea with you? Or were they all being stationed different places?
Well, there were 2 guys, when I was deployed to Korea, there was 2 guys in that bunch, and there was a boatload of them that I had went to AIT with, which was second 8 weeks of training.
Okay.
So I did know 2 different guys.
Okay.
I mean, personally. The rest of them, there was a part of a division. When I was on a boat, and that's how we got to where we were going, we went under the Golden Gate Bridge, sailed completely across the Pacific Ocean. We went to Hawaii, Japan. I was from Japan to Korea, then I was let off in Korea, and there was part of the 101st Airborne that went from Korea to Vietnam.
Okay.
I was let off in Korea.
Oh, okay.
But there was, I remember how many thousand, there was 3,000 or 4,000 guys on that boat.
Yeah. And so how long were you actually there?
In Korea?
Yeah.
17 months.
17 months. Okay. And then can you maybe describe the atmosphere of what some of these people were feeling at this time, either the men that were being drafted or even the women and children back home? Can you maybe describe the atmosphere of what everyone was kind of feeling at this point of the war?
What the atmosphere of the...
Of maybe just the community around you. For example, if people were upset about it, or if they still, at this point, I'm sure there was a lot unknown.
A lot of the general public that kind of was, I guess you'd call informed, was very much against the war. The other 50% of the public had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, there was, a lot of people blamed the military for what was going on, when in fact they should have blamed the politicians,
Yeah.
in my eyes. That's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
When I was mustered out at Fort Lewis, Washington, there was 200 and some. When I flew out at Kempo Air Base, I was one of like 210 guys or 5 guys, over 200 guys, just shortly over 200, that was on the airplane. We flew from Kempo Air Base to Tachikawa Airport in Japan. From Japan, we flew all the way to Anchorage, or to Alaska. Refueled, flew from Alaska to Seattle, Tacoma Airport. That's where we was let off the plane. But there was just a lot of us that were mustered out at the same time, and all of us had, at that point, had to go home. We were mustered out of the service. Well, I remember, like in Seattle, Tacoma, by the airport, we were all in uniform, and you couldn't even get a taxi driver to stop and pick you up. Well, there was 8 or 10 of us would stand on a corner trying to get a taxi to go to the airport to go home. Well, finally there was one taxi driver, older fella, stopped and picked up like 5 or 6 of us. Took us to the airport, which was great, Okay, I need tickets to go home. So I got flying what they call military standby. So I got my tickets, and I pretty much had to jump different airplanes to get home. So I flew from there to Portland, Oregon, from there to Boise, Idaho, from Boise, Idaho to Salt Lake City to Denver, from Denver to Omaha. But anyway, a couple of them places I had layovers.
Uh-huh.
Well, if you were in a particular hangar in the airport, and there was people sitting there, if you wanted to sit down by them, they didn't move.
Oh, really?
But that's the way the general public thought of the military.
Yeah, yeah. And so then, since you were stationed in Korea and not Vietnam, what were some of your responsibilities while you were over there?
Well, I was comm center, so I run communications.
Okay. And so what were some of the things that you did with that?
What's that?
What were some specific things that you might have done with that?
Well, you got infantry artillery, we communicated with all the different branches.
Okay.
Not branch, but, them are all different things.
Yeah. And then how well were you and the other soldiers kept in loop with what all was going on with the other wars? So how much did you guys know what was going on around the world during this time? Or did you still at that time not have a great understanding of what was going on?
Oh, no. At that time we had limited, but we did have access to television, radio, and all that kind of stuff. So we knew what was going on back home.
Okay.
And somewhat knew what was going on over there. But I maybe, for the most part, because I was in communications, I was exposed to a little more knowledge than a lot of the other people.
Okay.
Of what was going on over there, and we had communications like at Kempo Air Base and stuff like that.
Okay. And then how much were you in contact with Grandma and your siblings and everything? Very little?
Yeah, all we had was letters.
Letters, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have emails and all that kind of stuff like they got now.
Yeah. And then how do you think that the soldiers were treated in your eyes? Did they get the proper care when they were over there?
I think for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
We were fed pretty good, and if you had a medical problem, you go, I think we were treated pretty good, I guess.
Right. And so I know that my mother, your daughter, was born when you were over there. Is that correct? Right. And so then how old was she when you returned home?
How old was she when I first seen her?
Yeah.
Not too much shy of a year.
Yeah. So when...
Well, she was over a year old, in fact, because I was there for 17 months.
Yeah. So when did you find out that your wife was pregnant?
When did I find out when Becky was born?
When did you get knowledge that Grandma was pregnant with my mom? So when did you find that out? Did you not find out until you got back, or did you know when you were over there? How did you get knowledge?
Yeah. I would say when I found out that, I never seen her again until after your mother was born.
Right.
But there again, I found out Grandma was pregnant in a letter.
In a letter that she wrote you? Okay. That's what I was wondering. I didn't know if you didn't know that until you got back because of the communication
issue. I went, but
yeah. Okay. That's interesting. That's something that I didn't know. So you said you were there for how many months?
17.
17. So then when would you have got back home? When was that?
March of 1970, or not. Yeah, March of 1972, I think.
Okay. And then when you...
No, that ain't right. When was your mom born?
I don't know the year. She's 50 now.
I got home at 74.
Okay.
March of 74.
Okay. And then when you were drafted, did you know how long you were going to be over there, or did you go in kind of blindly, didn't knowing how long you would actually be over there?
No. I was a normal, I was employed to Korea. Okay. You normally pull a 12 months employment. Well, see, I was there for a year, and then I got orders to go to Stratcom Signal Group in Seattle, Washington. Well, your mom was 5 or 6 months old. Well, and I would have only been there, like 8 months or 9 months, whatever, because all my furlough time, I still had 2 months free time coming. So, rather than, because she was little, I'd had to go there and we wouldn't be together anyway, or I'd have to ship Grandma and your mom to Washington in the middle of the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to extend and stay in Korea 7 extra months, and then when I get out, I'll just get out. I'll
Yeah.
get mustered out
Yeah.
because I had 2 months of free time coming.
Okay.
So that's what I did.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about how the soldiers were treated in the airports and stuff, how people would get up and move. When you came back to Hastings, Nebraska, were you still kind of treated that way because you were in the war, or were people in Hastings a little bit more accepting of it? What was it kind of, how were you treated in Hastings once you got back?
I think for the most part, not being a big city like Denver, you had zillions of people. I think for the most part, when I got home, I was treated. Some people, were still the same way, but I'd say 85% of them wasn't. They treated you pretty well.
Yeah, that's good. And then how has your views on war changed over that period of time, or is it still kind of the same from the start of the war to even now?
Of the world?
Of the war, of the Vietnam War. So has your views of war from the very beginning of Vietnam War, or whenever you consider the beginning of the war till now, has your views on war changed at all, or have they pretty much stayed consistent over time?
I mean, war is war, but if you're going to fight a war, fight it to win it. Mm-hmm. What we did over there, and the way we did it, was one big mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then if you could tell me about a specific experience from the Vietnam War era, even that you'll just never forget. It's very vivid for you. Do you have a memory like that?
Of the war?
Yeah.
I guess the part of it that I'll never forget is the fact I lost a good friend.
Yeah.
That, that I worked with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so where were you working at that time?
Hmm?
Where were you working at that time before you were drafted?
The grain inspection.
Okay. And then when you returned home, did you continue working at that place, or did you find work elsewhere? How was that coming back?
I did for a little while.
Okay.
I worked for the grain inspection, but then it just wasn't what I wanted to do, so
Yeah.
I moved on to driving a truck.
Yeah.
I did that for 9 months. I went to work for a power company. In the story, I worked there for 40 years.
Yeah. And then what lessons did you maybe learn during this time that you think the others from my generation should know about that time?
Yeah, like you, other generations, like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, just any other generation that wasn't a part of that Vietnam era. Is there any lessons that you maybe specifically learned from that era that maybe you think it's important for other generations to know?
Well, I understand the American way. We don't. Different countries. They talk about human rights. Other countries there are people that are persecuted for various reasons, either nationality, religion, or whatever. That kind of stuff goes on all over. Mm-hmm. Different countries. I mean, France does it, England, all Germany. It's like the Germans and the Jews. People are persecuted for different reasons. Well, a lot of times the United States gets involved, I think, when they ought to mind their own business and stay out of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like your generation, even younger kids, need to know that there's times when you have to let people settle their own problems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can't inflict our beliefs on other people, just like we wouldn't want them to, come and tell us to, you know.
Yeah. And then, so once the war was over, did life kind of return back to normal, or were there things that were permanently changed? So once we had declared that we were out of war and not in it anymore, did regular life just kind of go back, or was there still some things that will just never be the same after?
No, there again, when I got home, I had a daughter that I had never seen. I had a wife to take care of. I had to feed them both. I had to house them both. So, once I got home, I was home 3 days and went to work.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, everything went back to normal.
Yeah.
For one thing, I was forced to do that, because I had a wife and kid to take care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then if you could explain the war in just one word, what would it be?
Mistake.
Mistake. And then can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? I know you kind of talked about how you think we should just kind of leave other people alone and let them handle their own issues, but can you maybe describe why you picked that exact word?
What?
Can you maybe describe how you picked that exact word, mistake?
Well, the reason I think it was a mistake is back, we lost 50,000 American soldiers, and we got pushed right out of the country. So we lost 50,000 American soldiers. He didn't gain a damn thing because of the fact we went over there and they said, the only time we want you to shoot is when you're shot at. It just don't make sense. If you're going to fight to win. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that way. It was a mistake to do that. If you're going to go over there and send all these military people over there, give them the ability to do what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
That's how I come up with it. Maybe there's a better word, but I call it a mistake.
Okay. And then as far as the war went, what do you think that maybe the community here, instead of the politicians, could have maybe done differently? Do you think that we should have gotten more involved, or what?
I would say more involved. I mean, we should have, if you're going to send, let's talk about military. Mm-hmm. If you're going to use military force against someone, use the force you have. And like I said, it's just, I'll give an example. The United States government kept going, let's, go to the peace talks. So Viet Cong wouldn't do that. So at a certain point, we went over and bombed Hanoi Harbor. We hurt them bad. So then, we said, this is what's going to happen if you don't want to talk peace. Well, then they finally went to the Geneva peace talks. The only reason they did is because of military force. When we bombed the hell out of Hanoi, excuse my French, when we bombed Hanoi, they knew that they better do something. But that's what I'm saying. And that, we could have done that, won that war in a month. Mm-hmm. We had the military might to do it, but the politicians won't do it.
Yeah. And then during that time, is there anything that maybe you were grateful for? Maybe something that you learned along that journey in your life?
Things that I was grateful for.
Yeah, or some maybe just important lessons that maybe you've learned from experiencing that in your own life.
Well, the fact that I was you know, in the signal, and while I was in Korea, I learned how to climb a pole.
Oh, okay.
That in itself kind of set me on a path
Oh, really?
for the rest of my life.
Okay.
When I got back home here, I said, do I go back to work for the ground inspection? I didn't want to, but I did because I needed a job. And then I worked for Junior in a co-op for 9 months and drove trucks. I didn't want to do that. Well, I got it, through an acquaintance of mine. I found out that Southern Power was looking for employees. So I went out and interviewed them. They said, well, what's your qualification? I said, no, I don't have any.
Yeah.
As far as doing the work that you do, I said, I can climb a pole. Probably not very good at it, because I just, did it a little bit. And they hired me. Make a long story short, I did that for 40 years until I retired.
Well, that's awesome. Do you have anything else to add? Any other stories you want to tell? Anything important?
No. As far as, quote, war in military, I still, to this day, even, with all the pluses and minuses or negatives or, whatever, positive, I'm still glad I served in the military.
Well, good. Well, thank you very much for serving this country. That means a lot to me and everyone else. I think that's the end of the interview. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course.